say the Hamas is homophobic. You say the Palestinian people want to kill all gays. Or the Palestinian people have no rights for gays. How can they have rights for gays when they don't even have rights for themselves? How ridiculous is that? It's like, how dare you, not up to us? It is beyond ridiculous, and it condescends everything of what pride is. No, as a gay man, I'm offended. How dare you, pinkwash, use my human rights, in fact, to defeat someone else's?
A man wearing a shirt that says Harper equals death and an upside-down maple leaf inside a pink triangle, protesting against Israel, and 4 Palestinians saying, how dare you say that Palestinians don't give gays rights? It's that time of year again, folks. If you didn't know, and I didn't, apparently Toronto is in the middle of what used to be Pride Day, then it became Pride Week, now it's Pride 9 days, and soon it's coming to a town near you. And if it's not, it will eventually, and then there'll be a whole thing about whether a flag goes up and whether your mayor gets elected or gets marched in the parade, and then how much money you're going to give them. I want to show you how much money the City of Toronto is giving to the Pride Parade, and of course there's federal money in there as well. So if you, doesn't matter where you live in the country, you're paying for this, and you're paying for the fight between the Pride Parade organizers and Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. Now, that meeting last night was attended by our own Faith Goldy. She joins us now to talk more about this. And Faith, this is an ongoing struggle between these two groups, the official Pride people and the Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, because the city says you can't have that group march in the parade, you can't have anything to do with them, but they keep coming back and they equate Israel with apartheid, even though Hamas would actually likely slaughter the whole group of them.
Quite true. It's the most wonderful time of the year, Brian. Now, I'm not entirely...
I'm scratching my head, and I just want to make sure that people understand.
Sure.
That's not hyperbole on my part.
No, it's not. Folks within Hamas are on the record saying that homosexuality should be punishable by death. Right now, male homosexuality is punishable by up to 10 years in prison in the Palestinian-occupied territories, if you will. This is according to the International Gay and Lesbian, and I believe it's asexual report, okay? It's a crime there as opposed to Israel, where Tel Aviv has basically marketed itself as one of the gay capitals of the world, seeing the fact that it's seen as a top destination for homosexuals, not to mention the fact that civil union between homosexuals is permitted, legal within that country, not to mention the fact that lesbian couples can actually artificially inseminate, you know, one of the partners. The other woman can then go on to legally adopt that child. Like, we're talking very progressive liberal democracy.
It's gone further down that road than Canada has.
Certainly.
But these guys in Toronto are holding a whole thing to denounce Israel. Tell me about some of the people that were speaking last night.
Well, you saw my good friend there, Brian, shares your namesake, upside down, pink maple leaf, plus the Harper equals death. It was a very odd night, and it's odd. Why? Because, as you mentioned, these folks will be marching in the parade this year, coming up this weekend. Now, I'm not too sure if the kind of the fisticuffs comes between Pride proper and this group, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, so much as it is the taxpayer versus Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. For me, saying the term it's odd, it's almost laughable because of the points that we just mentioned now, that for you to be homosexual and then to argue against one of the most progressive states, specifically within the Middle East. We're talking one of 3 or 4 nations that doesn't actually criminalize or even put to death their homosexuals.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'd rather not pay for the Pride Parade, period. Definitely don't want to pay for it with a group like this. But so tell me about, there was a guy there last night comparing what's going on to Canada.
Right. He's a large propagator of all things one state solution, will not tell me who he sees really as a leading governing party. However, whenever I tried to ask him any sort of questions, are you basically backing Hamas, what Canada sees and is deemed a terrorist organization while you're within our country, by the way, Mr. Chicago, are you actually backing a terrorist organization? He refused to answer my question unabashedly, categorically, yes or no. Instead, he just kept on wanting to turn everything around to the Indian issue here in Canada. Why don't we take a look at that clip?
I take this opportunity to call on Canada to finally seriously address centuries of dispossession of its indigenous people. And enough of the talk. We know that Prime Minister Harper said sorry, but sorry is just a word.
That's an angry George Smitherman with bushy eyebrows and a purple shirt there lecturing us on something. Look, everyone in Canada knows there's issues, but it goes both ways in terms of federal First Nations issues in Canada, and there are attempts to solve them. Prime Minister Harper just met with Sean Atleo. There are no rockets being fired, as far as I know, from reserves into Vancouver or Toronto. There are still rockets being fired by Hamas, but this guy, you're telling me, doesn't even see Hamas as a terrorist group.
Yeah, and he actually points to Israel as our ally and says that we should be questioning Israel's, negotiation with Hamas in any way, shape, or form, and to do anything less than that would be essentially to give in to a Canadian effort at propaganda. I believe we have that second Hamas clip back there. Can we take a look at that?
If Hamas is everything you say it is, you ought to be going to the Israeli government and say, you're undermining our propaganda efforts in Canada by constantly negotiating with Hamas.
Okay, so this guy's saying that Canada should be lecturing Israel because we say Hamas is a terrorist group. They negotiate with them. If Israel attacks Hamas-controlled areas for sending rockets in, they're denounced. If they negotiate with them, they're denounced by him. Israel, as always, in a no-win situation. Because,
Brian, according to these people, Israel has no right to defend herself. Zero. Question whether or not they really have a right to exist. That wasn't really addressed in the majority of the actual content. But look, Brian, at the end of the day, I argue certain things that a lot of folks don't agree with. It's my right to do so. It's their right to have these particular views as much as I might disagree with them. But what I disagree with categorically and most fundamentally is my tax dollars as a Torontonian paying my taxes going towards this message. When I'm out there, preaching defund abortion, I don't ask for taxpayer dollars. I get up with, Campaign Life Coalition. We raise our own funds. This event last night was put on by Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. But when they go and participate in this march coming up this week in this parade, that is going to be paid for by you and me, the taxpayer, especially those here in Toronto.
All right, Faith, good talking to you. We'll chat again, I'm sure. Look, I don't want to pay for these guys. I don't want to even pay for the naked sex parade that's coming up. But maybe I'm just old-fashioned and believe you should march with clothes on. Share your thoughts on Facebook. It's easy to find us. Facebook.com. Punch in my name or byline. Make sure you click like. Hey, we hit a milestone over 5,000. Thank you. Kudos. Keep sharing those stories. More.